Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours, the webcast where I answer your Azure SQL DB questions, SQL Server questions. You can hit the URL in the video description down there, polgab.com/room/Brento, and ask questions and upvote the questions that you'd like to see me cover. Upvoting is important here because I take the top voted ones, and like today, we have a huge stream of questions. I'm not going to be able to get to them all. I'm only going to focus on the ones that were highly upvoted. Got a few of the regulars in here: Frag King, Jim Van Allen, D. Sanchez. Good to see y'all. I have a hat on for two reasons. One is I need a haircut, but the other reason is I had to go pick up the Porsche Speedster replica from my mechanic this morning. I was having a clutch problem. I couldn't shift it into gear, and so I picked it up this morning and they fixed it. So I was driving around Las Vegas at 7 a.m., bright and sunny with the hat on because my hair's a hot mess. Sean Alex recognizes that that's the Isle of Man. This is one of my cherished hats. I absolutely love the Isle of Man. It's incredible. I had the chance to ride along in a motorcycle on one, like a trike, one of the big old trike motorcycles on the official TT course. Absolutely amazing. And loved it dearly. Loved the Isle of Man. I have a bunch of clothes and shirts from the Isle of Man. I need to get back there too. Haven't been back since the pandemic. Default Blame Acceptor says, any news about the backyard? It's been in a holding pattern for the last week. We're waiting on inspections for one wall. For some reason, Proficient Patios can only do one thing at a time. I have a whole laundry list of other things that need to be done. There's a putting green to put in. There's more landscaping work that needs to be done. There's a wall that has to be built around the pool equipment. There's stucco that has to be done on the sides of the walls, but they can only do one thing at a time. So they're waiting on the inspection for the TV wall. Whatever. Kind of weird. All right, let's go take a look at your top voted question. So the top voted question comes from Andrei, who asks, what's the appropriate response or punishment for developers who insist on storing JSON and XML data in nvarchar max fields? Andrei, you're not going to like my answer. My answer is I think they're doing it right. Hear me out. I don't want the database server validating whether or not something is XML or JSON. I want my developers to be able to store invalid stuff in there if they get malformed data from a client. I don't want them doing processing on XML or JSON inside the database. I don't want them doing XML indexes or JSON. I want them to just use it as a storage facility and pull the whole blob out when they need it. So as far as I'm concerned, they're doing it right. And I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear that, especially the people at Microsoft who get paid based on how much CPU your database server uses. Microsoft is like, why don't you store them as XML and JSON? Then we'll query them for you. You can use your CPU and the database server in order to do it. You can slice and dice and pull all kinds of information out of there. You just have to pay by the CPU. It's not your problem. You've never written us a check, right? So that's why I like it when developers just use nvarchar max. And there you go. Next up, Jeff Moden says, JustGoogleIt says, what are your thoughts on Jeff Moden's Black Arts index maintenance presentation? I love it. I link to it all the time. It's a video that's out on YouTube. The idea of that presentation came from, I told Jeff that fragmentation doesn't matter for GUIDs. You shouldn't be concerned about it at all. Let your tables get fragmented. And he thought, and his exact words were, he told me this, Brent, you must be drinking bong water. And so he set out to build a presentation and gather evidence to prove me wrong. And he ended up proving me right. So he's got this great hour-and-a-half long video that emphasizes the same thing that I believe in there. Jeff's a great guy. I really like him. Next up, Eli asks, any thoughts on whether the availability of NVMe storage interfaces on Azure VMs will finally help close the gap on cloud IOPS and throughput? Not even close. If you look at the IOPS, where those are at today, and it doesn't really matter whether you're looking at Azure or whether you're looking at AWS or Google, everybody's doing roughly the same thing. They're giving you thumb drive quality storage. It doesn't do a whole lot of IOPS. It doesn't do a whole lot of megabytes per second. Even when you get the quote-unquote premium and ultra premium storage, it's still only competitive with a $50 USB drive, flash drive that you can get off of Amazon. The storage interfaces aren't fixing it, unfortunately. Next up, Praveen asks, Brent, I want to change the data type from integer to big integer on a table with 2 billion plus rows. What's the best way to do this with minimal downtime? Check out, if you search on my blog, search on brentozar.com for spaghetti DBA, which sounds like I'm making it up, spaghetti DBA, and then the description of what you're trying to do. Gianluca Sartori, database administrator out of Italy, who happens to work for the Ferrari racing team, Scuderia Ferrari, wrote up a great idea on how to do this that involves row compression, and it enables you to do it with almost no downtime. Now, it does involve work because we have to, hey, Ben Miller's here, DBA Duck. You do have to compress the table ahead of time, but because that's an online operation in Enterprise Edition, you can do it with almost no downtime. It's a really slick technique. Next up, Fishy Poos, welcome. Thanks. He says, love your content. I love your name. All right, so there you go. MrGPT says, the SQL CPU reached 99%, and I saw a whole bunch of workers created. I couldn't find any wait types on SQL except hate or least timeout, but this is about max CPU reaching 99%. How are so many workers created? Is the only solution to set max workers to 1,000? No, and in fact, that's exactly the wrong way to do. That is the worst thing that you could do, is add more worker threads. If your CPU is at 99%, do you think that adding more work is going to make things better? I'm going to go with no. So what you probably want to do instead, I don't want to say have less workers because then you're going to run into other problems, but go check out in the Mastering Server Tuning class. I have a module on tuning for high CPU usage and tuning for SOS, tuning for high CPU usage and tuning for thread pool weights, which is also relative. Frag King points out that I haven't changed the description on my stream. Let me go change that now just so that, where is the thing? There it is. Let's see here. Office hours, ask me anything about SQL Server and Azure SQL DB. And then we'll change post your questions at https polgab.com/room/Brento. And we'll say done. There we go. We have now changed that stream info. Good catch. And Cirques, make sure to check out the link right below where the good-looking talking man says, where it says where to post your questions at there. All right, so let's see here. Next up, we have, Venkat asks, is the Azure SQL DB auto-indexing similar in index suggestion quality to Clippy in canned SQL Server? Azure SQL DB's automatic index tuning actually starts with the data from Clippy, then does additional analysis on top of it, replaying your workloads to see whether or not the index would get used. You know what they say, garbage in, garbage out. So it's starting with the garbage data out of Clippy, and it's trying to improve it as much as it can, but there's only so far that it can go. It's better, it's just not worlds better. And in fact, if anything, I'd say it's more limited because it doesn't do as many index recommendations. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's better than not having a database administrator at all look at the indexes, which is the case for most of these kinds of clients. Most of the people who are using Azure SQL DB's automatic index tuning don't even have a DBA. So in that case, it's just fine. Fritz asks, where do you shop for your cool meme shirts? Honestly, Instagram. I just bought like $200 worth of shirts from a company I think called Moonshots. But Instagram's ads are really good. Instagram is really good at figuring out the kinds of stuff that I want to see. Instagram is like my idea of the kind of app where I don't even want to block the ads. I think they know me so well. TikTok, not so much. TikTok, it seems like, while it's really good at figuring out which content I like, it's really bad at showing me related ads. It just seems like movie companies and TV companies are continuously buying ads that aren't even relevant to me. So I just kind of, whatever. Next up, MooneyFlyer says, sometimes I create schema-bound index views to improve select performance. How can I see the detailed execution plan that SQL Server uses for the inserts, updates, and deletes? SQL Server is only giving me an index update operator on the plan. So what that most likely means is that your indexed view only has the one table that you're using for the inserts, updates, and deletes. That index view doesn't join out to other tables. Try this over in development. Don't do this in production, but over in a development environment, create an indexed view that joins several tables together. Then do an insert, update, or delete against just one row in one of the tables and look at the actual execution plan. You'll see all those other tables being referenced in the execution plan. So that the reason that you're seeing such a simple plan is that you've done a good job of designing your indexed view, that it doesn't have a whole lot of dependencies. The more dependencies that you add, the more that you'll see in that insert, update, or delete execution plan. Benji asks, do you ever do the exotic car racing in Vegas? It's been on the back of my mind that like one of these days I need to do it. I have not done it. It's kind of expensive for what you get. I want to say last time I looked, it was like $200-300 for like 2 laps around a racetrack in a nice car. So I'm kind of like, okay, that's cool, but you're kind of flushing money down the drain relatively quickly. I don't need that fast speed. I don't have any really fast cars other than the Jaguar. The Jaguar's pretty quick. But so mostly what I like to do is just to go out in the desert in like Valley of Fire State Park and go race around out there in the desert. There's spectacular roads out there. The scenery's beautiful. It's really safe. It's really nice. Frag King says, does it even use index views on non-enterprise without no expand? Yeah, you're confusing things. Frag King, what he's talking about is doing updates, inserts, updates, or deletes. That has to use the indexed view. It has to affect the indexed view because the index view has to be kept up to date with your inserts, updates, and deletes. That's why he's asking there. Next up, Network Guy says, there's a big wall of text here. He says, we use SQL Standard with multiple databases on NVMe. Combined, it's 700 gigs. Can you suggest a test method or tool to measure the performance benefit of upgrading to Enterprise? Network Guy, let me ask you something. Could you put in anything else that's irrelevant in there? What color is the RAM? How many yards of string are in the storage? You're just randomly throwing words in there, man. So let's get to the point. This is, can you suggest a test method or tool to measure the performance benefit of upgrading to Enterprise rather than sticking the 128 pool buffer limit? No, because it's not just about how much you cache. It's also about query workspace. Check out my totally free class, How to Think Like the SQL Server Engine. How to Think Like the SQL Server Engine. You can Google for my name plus that. There's a written version. There's a version out on YouTube. It's about an hour and a half long. And one of the things that opens your mind inside there is it explains, among many other things, what SQL Server uses memory for. SQL Server uses memory for 3 major consumers, but there are many more as well. Caching data is the only one you're thinking about. But there's also caching query plans, and there's also query workspace, because SQL Server tries to do sorts and joins in memory as much as it can, and you can't predict the performance of that ahead of time. So what I'd turn around and I'd ask you is, what's your server's top weight type? Depending on what your server's top weight type is, that'll determine how you spend money for hardware. Now, in order to learn that, I teach a whole class on that called Mastering Server Tuning. Mastering Server Tuning, I teach you how to analyze your weight types so that you spend money on the right things instead of the wrong things. Now, let's be honest, Network Guy, you're probably not going to attend this class. You're probably going to watch the How to Think Like the Engine one, which is free. Then your boss isn't going to let you spend money on the training class. and you're going to be flushing tens of thousands of dollars down the drain on licensing trying to make the thing go faster. I'm not upset with that. Because network guy, I'm going to tell you your future. After your boss has done that and performance still hasn't gotten better, they're going to call me for advice. They're going to call me for consulting help, and I'll make money then. So network guy, go with God. Watch the free class, make bad decisions, and then come back to me for consulting after you flush tens of thousands of money down the drain. That's not your fault, network guy. It's your manager's fault. They're incompetent. You and I both know that. We know how it rolls. Next up, Sergi asks, is it possible using SQL to raise the CPU usage percent as privilege time? I understand this metric is only used for system processes, but I'm not sure. Sergi, let me ask the question, what are you trying to solve? What's the problem that you need to solve? I think you've gone a little too far down into technical details. What's the thing that end users are complaining about that's driving you to this as the solution? Follow up with that question, and then we'll go from there. Next up, Jason from Michigan. I actually know who this is because they emailed me. Oh, hi, SQL Saturday. Hello. I know who this is. Jason emailed me afterwards. He's like, there's actually more details than I can fit in the office hours question, but this is still a really good question, and I'm going to answer it knowing some of the things that I know from what Jason sent privately. He says, I occasionally see an error of timeout occurred while waiting for a buffer latch. What's going on with that? Well, what's typically happening, I always like to demonstrate data stuff by having an 8K page in my hand. What's typically happening is you've got an 8K page cached up in memory, and a lot of queries are fighting over it at exactly the same time. With this error, it'll give you the page number. So if you want, you can use the dbcc page command. Oh, it's super rare. People hardly ever do this. But dbcc page will let you see the contents of the exact page so that you can identify which table it is. Armed with that knowledge, then go run sp blitz cache with the parameter sort order executions. And you're going to see a query that runs really, really frequently, thousands of times per minute, maybe even thousands of times per second. And it's continuously having to fight over this page, cache it, figure out how you're going to cache it in the front end. If it's running in a user-defined function that's running row by row, rewrite that so that it's like inline, like a view or an inline table-valued function. And then that problem will just disappear. Servex follows up with CPU is getting very high, but most of the usage comes from privilege time. And when I see CPU, it seems to be SQL. Okay, great. Forget privileged. If CPU usage is high, go find the queries that are using the most CPU. The way that you do that is with sp blitz cache sort order equals CPU. If it sounds like I'm talking like Charlie Brown's parents there, wah, 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 wah. If you don't understand what sp blitz cache sort order equals CPU is, no problem. Google for sp underscore blitz cache. It's an open source stored procedure. It's in our first responder kit. He says, oh, I've tested it. Great. Okay, great. So you can run sp blitz cache sort order equals CPU, find the queries that are using the most CPU, and then you can work through those one by one. Next up, Dwayne asks, which Twitch gamers do you enjoy watching? Oh, so most of the time I only watch two games. I either watch Dead by Daylight or Grand Theft Auto. And when I watch Dead by Daylight, it's usually Spooky Loops or Slushy. Spooky Loops is like a fair and balanced. He's a good killer. And a good survivor. He's been doing it for a really long time. He tries to be good at his craft. Tells funny stories. He's even an amazing singer. Slushy, on the other hand, is a troll. Slushy likes trolling killers, and she's very, very good at it. I really enjoy watching her do her thing. When I'm watching Grand Theft Auto, it's typically Omar. I can't remember Omar's last name, but if you search on Twitch for Grand Theft Auto Omar, he plays as either a cop, he's an amazing cop, or he plays as an outlaw named Jose Exotic. Jose Exotic. And when he plays as Jose Exotic, he uses like this Mickey Mouse voice, and it's hilarious. He's he's also a troll. He's very funny. SQL Saturday, make sure to read the instructions on the screen on where to post questions there. Next up, let's see here. Pitsamarama, which sounds like someone has an armpit fetish. Nothing against that. No kink shaming here. You're welcome here. I'm just not going to raise my hands at the moment. It says, hi, Brent. We have 8 hotel databases on one SQL Server. Management has opted for moving them to Azure SQL. Since hotel business is a 24/7 one, what's the quickest way, the least downtime to migrate all 8 SQL databases to Azure? So this one is a little bit beyond what I can do inside of office hours. This is the kind of thing that people hire me for consulting for, because there's also a lot of things you have to think about. Should you be using Azure SQL DB? Should you be using a Azure SQL DB managed instances? Do you have joins between the databases? After you go live, how do you make sure that you get the uptime that you want? Because a lot of Azure SQL DB services don't have a whole lot of high availability or failover. You can either hire me for consulting or go check out, if you go to brentozar.com and click training up at the top, click training up at the top, and I have a whole class on running SQL Server in Azure where I talk about the different services and how you go about doing a migration. Jesse asks, a new question that just came in. Jesse asks, how would someone get into SQL Server consulting? For me, so I was a full-time SQL Server DBA. Everybody's story is going to be different. But for me, I was a full-time SQL Server database administrator. And I then happened to get a job working as a software evangelist. So mine is a little weird. The way that most people do it is, honestly, they get laid off from a full-time SQL Server position. They get laid off, and in a panic, they go looking around for jobs, and they discover that SQL Server consulting firms are constantly hiring. Well, I got to keep my armpits down, don't I? Are constantly hiring. So if you want to get into consulting and you don't mind working for someone else, go Google for SQL Server consulting, start going through the list, and just email them and ask, hey, here's my resume. Here are the things that I enjoy doing. Do you have any positions open? If you want to work for yourself, that's way harder because you have to build up a huge library of contacts who are ready to pay you before you go jump over to doing it yourself. That's a lot riskier, and it's really risky when you're working for an existing consulting company. Continues on, Jesse continues on, says, what do you like the most and hate the most about being a consultant? What I like the most is being able to set my own hours. So I'm at the point in my life where I can pick and choose which days a week I want to work and which hours per day I want to work. I'm the kind of person who I'm really productive from between, it's going to sound goofy, 4 a.m. and noon. I tend to wake up at 3 a.m. without even an alarm. I just wake up and I'm ready to go. So at 4 a.m. to noon, I do work. And then at noon, I have lunch and go take a nap, or take a nap and do lunch. And then my second day starts. So then I get to go goof off and go hang out in the pool, play Dead by Daylight, whatever. And if I want to take a week off, or if I want to go on a cruise and not be on call, I can do that. I adore that. What do I hate the most? The hate the most is probably the stress of where's your next meal coming from? How do you know that you're going to have enough work coming in? And I've been doing this for so long, and I have such a good search engine reputation, such good word of mouth that I have a long list of clients. But when you're just getting started, it is terrifying to think about, all right, what am I going to be doing 3 months from now? Build up your savings. Next up, Rufus. Yeah, I'm like Lynn says, I'm crossing my arms continuously now. Rufus asks, how do you track down data corruption when the source lies in networking hardware? I don't. Once you have database corruption, you ever seen a scary movie? You ever seen one of those horror movies? And while you're sitting in the audience, you notice the people on screen and you're like, get out of the house. There's a killer there. Why are you waiting around? Get out. People are like, have you got a flashlight? Let's go down in the basement. I heard a noise. Let's go see what that cause is. Get out. Corruption is just like a scary movie. Don't take your flashlight down into the basement looking to see what the monster is. Get out. Evacuate. Move your data somewhere else. Just like a horror movie. Next up, Iskenderun. Iskenderun? That's kind of cool. Sounds like Icelandic, maybe. Says, should we expect much of a server performance hit when we simultaneously enable SQL transport encryption and transparent data encryption? When you say much, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say 5 to 10% CPU as a pretty bad case. It's not the worst case, but it's a pretty bad case. If your SQL server was already at 50, 60, 70% CPU usage, that could be a problem. But it's extremely rare that I see SQL servers running their CPUs that hot. That's my 2 cents there. Tony says, how many of your SQL Server, or how many of your customers run SQL Server on Kubernetes? None. Zip. Zilch. Zero. Is this a skill worth learning? Not. No. But hell no. Microsoft and SQL Server 2019, when they brought it out, before they brought it out, leading up to it, they're like, hey, everybody, it's going to support availability groups on Kubernetes. And I kept watching the demos, and I'm like, that doesn't work. You're not even close. Like, there's no troubleshooting in this. It's going to fail like crazy. I'm looking at their steps, and I'm like, no human being is going to pull this off. And so sure enough, as we got closer to release, Microsoft is like yanking the feature right out, disappearing it from books online, and they never released it. SQL Server 2022 came out 3 years later. You know what? The feature wasn't in there either. So if Microsoft can't bring that feature out, availability groups on Kubernetes, and they said they could, and it's been like 4 years now, I don't really want to bet my horse on that. I think it's idiotic. Tim asks, do you have any plans to purchase the Apple Vision Pro? Yes, absolutely. I had my credit card ready when they announced it. I was warming that thing up, going, come on, please let me just swipe it right now. I am absolutely in. $3,500 sounds like a lot, and it is. That's more than my first 2 cars, probably 3. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but I tell you what, the ability to sit in an airplane and just relax and watch a video and be taken away somewhere else completely, the ability to make any place a sanctuary. I have sat in so many airports and waiting on delays and whatnot. That would be a quality of life thing that would be huge for me. And while it sounds like a lot, it's really not that much more than one international first-class flight. So if you think about it as a percentage of what your travel spend is, it makes every flight, say you take 10 flights a year, and it makes every flight plus all the layovers a first-class kind of experience. It's not really that bad. Let alone the ability to actually work on a plane and see full scale. I can't work very well on a plane when I'm looking at a very tiny, like a 15-inch monitor. Hell, I got like a 30 and a 15-inch here on my desk, 34, whatever this thing is. And that's like I would consider the bare minimum. So I am all about it. I am totally down the instant that they drop that thing. Vishnu says, what are the telltale signs that the network bandwidth for your SQL server is not sufficient? I've never seen one. So you might be asking why. Brent, why is a network never a problem? Well, if you think about how much results you would have to push out the door, how much select star you would have to be doing to saturate an entire network pipe full of data, you're going to hit problems long before then. You're going to hit problems with locking, blocking, CPU, storage access. The only way network could become a problem is if you were doing select stars out of a table with no order by, because remember they can't be sorted. Just dump, because if they were sorted, you'd be hitting CPU problems. Dumping out entire tables. And if you were doing that, somebody would come along with a fish and smack you right across the front of the face. I've been there. Eduardo asks, are there any risks to our SQL Server running long periods of time without a reboot? Yes, patching. Patch your SQL servers. I know the patches can be kind of sketchy, but patch your SQL servers. If I see somebody, even if you run like 3 cumulative updates behind, they still come out every 30 to 60 days. Go patch them. Sean said, we had 10 megabytes per second going from 25 servers at once. The only time that ended up being an issue was the IT team installed an IPsec tool, which filtered everything in a system driver, and that wouldn't work. And absolutely, and you would see it as CPU pressures or single-threaded CPU pressures rather than a network bandwidth pressure. Next up, Stuck in the Cloud DBA says, hey Brent, how do you approach index creation for apps where included columns are not supported? I don't do includes. Did you need a Microsoft certified master to answer that question? When someone tells you they don't support something, pro tip, don't do it. It says, will it be possible to have optimized enough performance with the only indexes as the key columns? Who cares? Because that's the only thing you're allowed to do. If that's the only thing you're allowed to do, then do that thing. And if you need more performance than that, buy more hardware. Because I guarantee you, Informatica costs a lot of money. I have a car collection. I don't think you could implement Informatica for the cost of my entire car collection. I think it costs more than that. You do not want to be the person who gets thrown under the bus because you did something unsupported. Do what they support. Pro tip. Sean says, that is such a good answer. Thank you. Every now and then, as my grandfather would say, every now and then, even a blind squirrel can get a nut. Ismir says, does commercial SQL monitoring software negate the need for query store? The thing with most commercial monitoring is that it doesn't do plan guides or plan forcing. It'll tell you which queries were the most resource intensive. It'll help you slice and dice those over time. But if your only way to fix them is to pin a previous plan or to use query store hints, for example, to hint the plan differently, there's no real replacement for query store at this time. That would be the number one. Now, if you never need that, if you never do that, if you never want to rewind a plan back to an earlier version or use plan hints, then totally, commercial monitoring software is totally fine. I would also say, let's ask the opposite question. Does query store negate the need for commercial SQL monitoring? No, because query store doesn't tell you when things go bump in a night. Query store doesn't tell you when the server's having a huge blocking emergency, when jobs are failing, when the SQL Server cluster can't fail over. So they serve slightly different purposes. Sean says, having Azure SQL database, I just find I miss commercial SQL monitoring. Yeah, it's weird. Things like Azure SQL DB and Amazon RDS with its performance insight stuff, where I find is a really good audience is companies that never had monitoring software or a DBA before. If you're a small business and you never had a DBA and you never had SQL Server monitoring, you are going to adore Amazon RDS, Azure SQL DB. Because they do a good job of high availability, good enough job, better than what you were getting before. You don't have to deal with clustering or mirroring or availability groups or any of that shabazz. And plus two, you get a pretty good basic console for which queries have been the most resource intensive, what kinds of bottlenecks you're hitting. It's just really basic. The shops that struggle The shops who struggle with the move to Amazon RDS and Azure SQL DB are the ones that have a team of full-time DBAs and professional monitoring tools that have done a really good job of handcrafting queries over the years. Those shops tend to feel like they're the most handcuffed when it comes to dealing with the limitations of RDS and Azure SQL DB. All right, so there we've been going for like half an hour, I think. That's a pretty good stopping point. I will stop office hours here. Thanks for hanging out with me. Tomorrow, I know I've talked for a while that I was going to do Dead by Daylight streaming. It is not going to be tomorrow because I still haven't finished setting up my PlayStation and audio and all that. Tom and Yorks, hey, welcome in. So tomorrow we'll be doing either questions or I may do some first responder kit stuff. But I won't be switching over to Dead by Daylight just yet because this afternoon I already have plans. I'm doing afternoon tea. I'm doing afternoon tea at the Waldorf Astoria here. I love British tea service. It feels so civilized. There's this dainty cups and everyone's dressed nicely and you get all these little finger sandwiches. It's really cool. There's actually places in just about every big American city that do it. It's so cool once I found that weird thing. Shane says, what killer do I like to play? I got my start on Wraith or Bing Bong, and I've since moved over to Trapper. I like playing killers that people don't usually see. And I played a lot of Survivor, and I always got excited when it was a killer that I didn't see very often. So I like playing Bing Bong and Trapper, and I like playing them very tailored to their design. Like with Trapper, I love just relying on traps and nothing else. I don't chase around the map. I just carefully set up my traps the way an animal trapper would, and then I patrol my traps, and whenever they catch people, I knock them out and throw them on the hook. I don't win most of my games, but I have a lot of fun. And I always think of it as like I'm doing a service to people who play Survivors. With Bing Bong, I like to give jump scares. I like to come out from nowhere. And so I use the invisibility stuff and the silent rings a whole lot in order to surprise people from around a corner and be like, ah, gotcha. Cheetah says, come to Cardiff, Wales. I have been. I went probably a decade ago. It was a really long time ago, but Bits had something in Wales, and then I ended up doing a little driving tour around through there. Linestia says, I'm here for when game streaming happens. I figure it's going to be really funny for the audience to see because I'm also super animated. I swear a lot. Y'all wouldn't realize this from my our regular streams. I swear in real life constantly. I mean, just like at dinner or anything else, I have a really bad sailor mouth because I grew up in hotels and restaurants, and kitchens, like restaurant kitchens, are foul. People swear, and I mean, you think Gordon Ramsay is tough. He is being reserved for television. Real kitchens can be way worse than that. Now you go to fine dining and they have to keep it nice and tidy because they're working in front of other people. But the instant you get them back behind closed doors, it's so I swear a lot. And so I have to be kind of aware when I do game streaming because when I'm playing by myself, I swear constantly. So I'll probably have to give a warning when I do a game stream at the beginning. Hey, if you're at work, don't have this up on audio. It'll be the kind of thing that I won't upload to YouTube. We'll just leave it on the Twitch replays because it's very adult only. Ha ha! Ginestia. I keep saying it's Linestia because I was looking at a different monitor. Monitor, but Ginestia or Ginestia. You got to tell me how to refer to you on the stream there. It says, now I want to see this SQL version of Hell's Kitchen with Brent. It's really fun with clients when I'm in person, when I'm in the same room, because generally the worse, generally the worse the situation gets, the more fun you can have. When things are only just a little bit bad, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You want to be, it's okay, we're doing a good job, we just need to change this one thing. But once things get really bad, I can be like, okay, listen, I need to talk to you about this. And I always like to say to clients, okay, here's the part that I'm not going to write down. This isn't going to be in the report. I'm not going to write this down. The report's going to have much cleaner language, flowery, colorful language. In here, I'm going to say F this. And it's funny how companies will react in different ways. You have to be able to read the room, which is why it works so much better in person. Chitan says, I want to take you a place that have British high tea in Wales with Indian samosas. I love Indian food in England. I think so many Americans don't realize just how good Indian food is in England. It's amazing. Absolutely fantastic. All right, so thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see y'all on tomorrow's office hours. Adios.